of PLP Pathways. We would like to thank the Middle Grades Collaborative and Tarrant Institute for helping support this programming, connecting teachers around the state of Vermont around developing a PLP plan for student success. I'm Maura Kelly. I teach at People's Academy Middle Level. And joining me here today, Don and Kevin.
I'm Don Taylor from Main Street Middle School in Montpelier.
And I'm Kevin Hunt from Wilson Central School.
Okay, we're getting some weird sound there.
Oh,
Oh, it stopped. So I don't know what that was, but that's okay. So just real quick, since we last met, we've talked about a couple of things. I know a lot of teachers are learning opportunities and starting to fill their schedule for the summer. So I know that we wanted to remind people that the Middle Grades Institute is happening at Castleton State College this year from June 27th to July 1st, and that is awesome professional development. And this year the title of the conference is called Flexible Pathways. So there's going to be a lot around Act 77, implementing PLPs in the classroom, personalized learning, and also if people are interested in getting their middle level endorsement, that's always a place to go and do that. Maura, have you been exploring any professional learning opportunities? And there's Megan.
Hi guys.
Hey, what's going on? How are you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you. How are you?
Good. We just finished introducing ourselves. Do you want to introduce yourself too?
Sure. My name's Megan Gagne. I am a 9th through 12th grade humanities teacher at the Colchester Alternative Program at Colchester High School.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us. I was just rattling on about the Middle Grades Institute and how registration just opened this week for that. And so anybody who's interested can go to the Middle Grades Collaborative website, and then you know, you can sign up, and it's just great professional development. I think one thing that makes it so good is they encourage teams to go down there, and you can really work on developing a plan. So that's a great place to start. Any other professional development opportunities out there?
I know that the Middle Grades Collaborative has a call for manuscripts out. So if you're a teacher and you're working on something exciting in your classroom, or you have reflections about implementing PLPs or anything like that, they are requesting manuscripts for their publication. And so that's a really great opportunity to share what's happening in your classroom.
Right, and I know, Kevin, did you want to talk just real briefly about what we're trying to get together with the NEA?
Yeah, so NEA will be sponsoring PLP Pathways. On June 20th, we'll be holding an all-day workshop, 8 to 3, where Don and I will just share what we've been doing with the PLP process, what's worked and what hasn't worked, and then really just offering participants a chance to start their own template with an e-portfolio and kind of dive into the PLP process while we're there.
Yeah, and I think, you know, I mean, it would be awesome if there were people who were going to go to the MGI, you know, and that could be a place for them to start and talk about the PLP pathways and work on that. But just folks should be keeping their eye out for professional opportunities. And I just want to mention, too, if people know anybody who wants to write or contribute or collaborate to PLP pathways, if folks out there want to write a blog and you know, maybe ask questions or get some focused attention on what they're doing, please let us know, because we're always looking for folks who are you know, developing and want to extend their professional abilities through writing and communicating. All right.
So the first thing that we wanted to talk about today was thinking about your conversation that you've had, Don, with the Hazen Union School, and your conversation that you had with John Craig. So could you share a little bit about what that was like?
Yeah, so I ran into John Craig at the Middle Grades Institute last year. I know that Hazen Union, and let me just back up, John Craig is the curriculum coordinator and assistant principal at Hazen Union Middle School. And he had brought a team to the Middle Grades Institute last year, and I know that they were doing a whole bunch of stuff all at once. They were rolling out one-to-ones. They were implementing PLPs. And I had seen some work that he had done, and it was really interesting. They created a video that's actually now linked on the PLP Pathways webpage. And what they did is they linked identity of their students to the identity of Hardwick. And so they did some historical exploration. They talked about community and relationships and how the kids are operating and fitting in to that area. And I just thought it was a really interesting and neat project that they did that combined a lot of different classes. It was really inclusive. And the kids up there are really participating in the education. They're doing the blog posts, they're doing newscasts, they're helping to produce the videos. And so I talked to him, and in that conversation, a lot of the things that we've been talking about came up. The flexible pathways to learning, teachers being challenged to think about their programs and their process, how you fit the PLP into existing programs, how you work on personalizing the education to engage learners. And it was just they're just doing a lot of neat stuff. They're doing a lot of it, some of the foundations that we're talking about, they're incorporating into it. And I think they're publishing it, which makes it even more interesting, because you can go and see these videos and see what they're doing and see how they're incorporating a lot of these elements into it. And I just thought it was a really good example, and that's the kind of thing that, for us at PLP Pathways and for teachers out there, those are the sorts of things that are really, they're really positive and they're really influential to other teachers, and that's sort of the point. And so we tried to get him on this call. It didn't work out, and I went and I interviewed him for about 15 minutes the following week. Again, that's on the PLP Pathways webpage, and it's just really cool to see kids who are engaged and are working hard. And it's also interesting to hear John, as an administrator, talk about what that's meant for his teams, for his scheduling, and for his teachers and their dispositions towards new challenges. And it sounded exciting. It's a great example, and I encourage people to go to the PLP Pathways webpage and just check that out.
And I think if I could just circle back to the power that having that team attend the Middle Grades Institute really had on their ability to start the school year off strong with this project and jump into all this work. And it was from conversations that they'd had with people who were on the staff at MGI that helped to sort of guide them. So they were able to talk to Lindsay Hallman from the Edge Academy and get information on how to develop a theme as a school, and they were able to sit there and make decisions so that when they came back to school, they were really energized to really jump in with both feet and start all these initiatives.
And I would just add too that I know with one of the purposes for the PLP Pathways is that we have sort of continuing embedded professional development, so it's not just a one-dayer and then we're done, but it kind of continues so you can keep up these conversations. And I think that even though at the end of the year, that's maybe the best time to plan for the following year, because the experience is still fresh. And I think it's really important that folks think about that, because as you mentioned, that lays the foundation for the next year. And I know, at least in my experience, if I don't think about the year pretty early in the summer, I can end up having a year that's pretty rushed and feels like it's not as effective as it could be.
Great. One of the things that we wanted to think about today, we've been talking a lot about the transferable skills, but one of the things is really thinking about, and Kevin has some stuff to share about this, but how do we link our evidence to the transferable skills? I think this is one of those big challenges. How do we have students reflecting on their work, and how do we have them picking evidence that helps to support and show their growth? And so what are people doing that they're finding helpful?
Yeah, so I can chip in on that one. So one thing that's been really useful with us is having that discussion during our Hopes and Dreams conferences when the students are creating their goals for the year based on the transferable skills. So we have our students create one goal for every transferable skill. When we have the discussion, it's really, we get out the whole piece of why is this goal important to you, so this making sure that the kid really understands what's the goal saying. And that really helps so throughout the year they can find evidence to match and to meet the criteria for the goal. So every week we set aside a half an hour, and our students go on their Chromebooks, open up their e-portfolios, and we ask them to write just a quick little blurb about each one of their goals. So they have a weekly goal reflection, just this is what I did this week, I still need to work on it, or I showed some progress this way. And then we ask that they add 1 to 2 pieces of evidence for at least one of their goals each week, with the hope that by the end of the trimester they have at least 4 pieces of evidence with reflection for each transferable skill category. And it's just been a really smooth process for us, and what's been helping is as students put evidence into their e-portfolio, we ask them to just write a 1 to 2 sentence reflection on how does that evidence connect to that transferable skill goal. So it keeps them thinking about, okay, why did I even put this evidence on this page to begin with? So that's been pretty helpful for us.
If I could jump into another, one of the things, it's actually, I think the process for us hasn't been as smooth. We had our students actually just choose one goal for a personal goal connected to the transferable skills, but they were based off of an essential expectation that Colchester High School came up with, and we found that actually focusing on one was really helpful for our students. One of the pieces, I'm glad you mentioned like just keeping track of progress. One of the things we found tough is when students don't meet their goals, and for example, if they have a goal in self-regulation because it's something that they really are struggling with, we found that to try to keep it as positive as we can, because it's been pretty discouraging for students to week after week look at that goal and be pretty disappointed if they haven't made progress. So we've been trying really hard to focus on smaller moments. We've been working a lot too, like you, Kevin, looking at evidence and really what evidence is going to show that I made some progress, even if it's just one moment that I did a really good job, to keep it as positive as we can.
One of the things that we had a faculty meeting on Monday of last week, and it was an hour-and-a-half long faculty meeting, and one of the big conversations that we had was around the word reflection, and if we're using it too much and it's becoming really watered down for kids, and so if we're asking them to do it all the time, which we need them to do, what is the result that we're having? And so we were coming up with all different ideas of how do we get kids to reflect and give them multiple options. And so one of the things that one of my takeaways for my class was it was sort of like this equation, like your work plus your thoughts equals evidence. And so instead of calling it like reflection, I started sort of calling it your thoughts, but I made this grid for students and I broke it down to multiple intelligences and options of ways to reflect. And so they could then select, so anytime, no matter what class they were in, if a teacher was like, can you reflect on whatever it is, or can you show your thinking around this, they had sort of a menu of choices of things that they could between, putting together this animatic, so it's like this animated comic strip, like flip book of what was going on, and those were sort of their thinkings, plus a work sample, and then putting that together in a blog post to show their growth, or interviewing a partner. So we gave social options and individual options. And I found that to be really helpful because the students then are making different choices than always selecting writing, which I think is really good, but it also adds another layer of sort of critical thinking when they're thinking about how they're going to share out their thoughts about their growth in their work. And so that's been really helpful for me, linking their evidence to their work and their goals.
Mm-hmm. I'm really glad you mentioned that, Maura, especially the one about interviewing a peer. I think I could see a lot of my kids doing that, and it reminds me, I had this perfect moment where one of my students recently drew the best picture. He was really, really stuck, and then I came over and he had this picture of a person drawn that just said, I don't know, like making this face. And it really it was a perfect picture of, I think, how he really felt in that moment. I really don't know what to say, and he had this perfect little picture of this person saying, I don't know. But I like having the menu options, especially the one, we've never done that, interviewing a peer, I think would be a great one to add.
I find that's really helpful, and as much as I can have them talking to each other, because a check-in with me is great, but they oftentimes have different insight and kind of not trust their friends' opinions more, but it sometimes is a lot more engaging for them to get feedback from peers.
So I have, can tag along on many elements of this conversation, but one of the things that happened, we just finished, so I had talked previously about developing curriculum with the PLP in mind, and this had just kind of occurred to me, and so I just finished teaching the Odyssey. I read the whole thing out loud, and what I did is I posted art of it while I was reading out loud and pictures from the book. So we went through it. The kids really liked it. They loved having the art and the visuals. And but some of the essential questions, I used backward design, and one of the questions was, what are Odysseus's principles and values? And then I asked, how did relationships impact his journey home? So I was thinking about, because we've asked the kids, how are relationships important? What are your principles and values? And I'm trying to increase the engagement by using these ideas that we have in the PLP and that personal learning framework. And so I asked them, so after about 3/4 of the way through, I asked them some questions about the Odyssey. They really liked it. And then I asked them some questions about whether or not the Odyssey helped them think about their relationships and their principles and values, and then some other PLP questions. And the answers were, they were okay. But for the PLP, I was asking them about goals and relationships and principles and values. And what happened was I ended up going back and asking them, hey, what's the story with the PLP? And they told me that they wanted more of their goals to be around the transferable skills. And I asked them why. And they said because the transferable skills allow them to choose goals that are important to them. Right? And so, because we've been asking kids to set goals, like 2 academic goals, a transferable skill goal, and a citizenship goal. And it turns out, and so I asked them about the academic goal, and they said, well, I set an academic goal to get, a proficient with distinction in this class, and I did that, but I don't care about it. You know what I mean? Which is really interesting to me, that kids, they'll do what you ask them to do, but they don't care about it as much as if it was a goal that's originating from them. And so in this conversation, I just kind of kept going back to the idea that Kevin's brought up numerous times about using the transferable skills as what you should be basing your goals on. And I've been thinking a lot about that lately. And I don't know if you got the agenda, but I have 2 graphics that I kind of came up with. And this is basically about a week and a half ago. And the reason I've been liking this transferable skills, if you notice those 4 bullets, number 1, they're inclusive. So you can have kids with all sorts of talents who can set goals around transferable skills. They don't just need to be good readers and writers. They can be really great skateboarders. They can be really great athletes. They can be great flute players. The transferable skills allows you to bring in all those kids into your classroom and your community. They also, obviously, they can be applied to extracurricular activities, but they also cover a wide range of mediums, technology, and skills. So again, a kid who struggles writing could be a great guitar player, and that might be a transferable skill goal that they can set and that they can show their proficiency in, and that can be a way that they're engaged in your community. So I guess in sum, I've just been really thinking hard about making all my goals that transferable skill related. And then the other thing I just want to mention is that we have Green Team every Monday, which is a citizenship piece, and we have about 2 hours on Monday afternoons, and the second hour has been totally Green Team. And I think what we decided is that the first hour is going to now be PLPs, where kids are going to be doing exploration and kids are going to be looking for evidence to tie to their goals. And I think we're going to employ a critical friends process, where we have kids in groups of 2, 3, and 4 talking to each other and evaluating each other's PLPs on a peer-to-peer social interaction basis. So I kind of long-winded, I know, but there's a bunch of stuff that's been happening, and it's all kind of tied to those transferable skills, goals, and having kids interacting with each other to sort of evaluate that and to build that momentum.
I think that's a really great point. One of the things that we made the choice this year to not put students in categories for the types of goals, because last year we had 2 academic goals and 1 personal goal, and they all had to be linked to the transferable skills however they wanted to. And this year we felt like, you know, it would be more important for us to have students set more meaningful personal goals linked to the transferable skills and achieve those goals because they're passionate about it, and then pick another goal or, you know, bridge off of that with another transferable skill goal. And we found that the students are a lot more engaged in their work, and kind of not, as teachers, we weren't driving the goals that they were selecting as much, or we weren't having to like kind of pull it out of them as much as previously. So I think that's a good thing to think about.
And that I saw in the Q&A section on here, James Nagel is asking how we walk students through the process of selecting evidence that's pertinent to the goals and how often you do the process. And I think with transferable skills is it's taking that, you know, it takes the onus off the teachers and puts it on the kids where, you know, like Don, you were saying with your kids, they're able to explore and say, yeah, I might not be a good writer, but I'm good at these other things, and I can use these other avenues and other aspects of my life to show growth toward this goal that has to do with a transferable skill. And that's one thing that we're continuing to grapple with, is I want that to be more of a fluid process where students have more of an open mind, that when they're in school doing their PLP process, it doesn't just have to be, you know, find evidence from your various content classes, you know, for your various goals, but think, I'm like, okay, you had this goal, what'd you do at home for this? Like you were talking about perseverance, you just had a great soccer game, you know, you persevered on the soccer field, you can put that in. So I want, that's one thing I would love to move forward to, is just getting that so it's more just natural, because that's something that I feel like as facilitators we end up suggesting like outside the classroom walls, but you know, the more we do it, I'm hoping that the kids will start just taking it on themselves to think more broadly, you know, their whole life versus just what they're doing in the classroom.
Do you? Sorry.
Well, I know that you had talked about using the reflection too much, but to me, you know, looking at that question, walking through kids, selecting evidence, I think that's where the reflection comes in, where, you know, you pick evidence and then maybe you go back and look at that a week later, 2 weeks later, at the end of your quarter or trimester, and ask the kids the questions, hey, is this the best evidence that you have? You know, or why did you pick this evidence at this time? And so I think that reflection is a key piece of having kids start to recognize, as Kevin mentioned, what's good evidence and maybe what's quality evidence, and how do you recognize that and put it onto your PLP.
Does anyone showcase students' evidence that they're selecting or anything like that?
We do, but pretty informally, I think. Just like when we're working on it, I think then it will come up, and just naturally, kids when they're talking about it, it will come up. I think the things that are most helpful for my students right now are definitely just conferencing and having conversations with their peers or with teachers about, is this a good piece of evidence? One thing I've been asking a lot of is just asking students right away, first thing, what's something you feel like you've done well this week, or what's something you feel like that you're proud of that you did this week, and that sort of will spur, well, I did well in my soccer game, or that will sort of come up as I ask them, what do you think you did well? And it's also been nice because I feel like, at least with the population of kids I work with a lot, they've actually struggle, I think, to feel pride sometimes, and it's been nice to have them, I think, feel proud of what they're doing. And I think the practice of it has actually been good for them.
One of the things that we do on Friday mornings, we have a town meeting, and so the whole 7th grade gathers and we have our celebrations, but what we've been doing recently, and we found it to be so helpful, is we have 2 or 3 students share either a blog post that they've done reflecting on their goals with evidence, or sharing out sort of where they are with their growth and showing evidence. And so every week we set the tone on Fridays of sharing evidence. Students are sharing videos or, you know, different things. We had a student who, you know, is starting an origami class, and so she was talking about that. We have another student who has a perseverance goal. She's in ballet, and so she had all these video clips of the work that she's done over the past week. And then we talk about it as a whole grade, and we set that up because right after that time, students then go in and are collecting their evidence and reflecting, and then going into their sort of partner groups to talk about their goals and their evidence. And so it just sort of sets the tone on Friday, and we kind of try and make it a celebration. We also throw in other celebrations that might not fit their goals but would be really great evidence for students for a goal they might have in the future. And so it just sort of makes it more of a celebration, I think, than just a task. And we try and encourage students who might traditionally not get up in the middle of a humanities class and share their work. We really encourage those students to share out the wonderful things that they're doing and the growth that they're making on their goals.
That's an awesome idea, especially incorporating into the Monday meeting. And I was also wondering if TA, or Teachers Advisory, might not be a cool place to showcase some stuff with with your smaller group, and to show what folks are doing in that, just in kind of a little more intimate setting.
The next thing that we have, or are there any last thoughts on evidence?
Well, there's just looking at the question again. Question popped up, just asking how long do you think the process will take? Selecting the evidence to show proficiency, and if this is why we should move to multi-age teams. I know within Swift House we are a 5/8 team, so in my core we have 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th graders doing PLPs, and typically they come in as 5th graders. That's when we create their goals, and they stick until they meet them. So sometimes I have 7th graders now who still have similar goals that they had as 5th graders. We just tweak them, and we try to set bigger picture goals versus just something that they could complete by the end of the week. So it does. I guess short answer to that is it could take anywhere from a year to 4, depending on what the student's progress is. And like Don was saying, we use their reflection to gauge what their next step should be, and that's why the ongoing reflection, I think, is really at the crux of the PLP process.
There's also one piece I'd like to offer as far as academic goals go and students who are on IEPs. One of the things that I've done, the special educator on our team, and we sat together and looked at all the students' academic goals and their IEPs. And it was really nice actually to sit down with those students and look those over. I think often those goals are written and then they're put away. And it was really nice for those students to see their academic goals and their IEPs. And then it also was really great for the special educator to have those students be providing evidence to show progress. I think it tied everything together, and that worked very well with our team and with our students.
Was that so when you had that conversation, Megan, was that special educator, teacher, student, parent, when you guys were looking at those goals and the IEP goals, who was involved in developing that? Because that's something I've considered too, is students on IEPs, they have these goals set, why not use those as a foundation for their PLP?
Yeah, for us it definitely helped as far as writing the academic goals themselves. That was more, when initially in writing of the IEP involving the whole team. For the IEP goals themselves, but as far as making those their PLP academic goals derived from the IEP, that was really just the special educator, myself, and the student, or my other co-teacher. It was just us when they were first sitting down in that goal setting process. Then we actually pulled all of them and had a sheet for each student. We have a smaller population, so it was a little easier for us to pull each one and say, here's a list of some of your academic goals in your IEP. And right away, actually, they were pretty good about going, oh yeah, I definitely want to work on the math goal. It helped to have them already pulled and almost have a bank of goals that they could choose from. And that helped, and then I think it just tied everything together. And they really want to close, some of them who have those really bigger gaps really want to close them, so it helped I think to tie it together.
That's great.
Yeah.
One of the questions that Tricia had was about, and I think this also ties to evidence, is how do you help students make smaller action steps? And thinking about that, how do you make smaller action steps to scaffold them to their goals? In my brain, I think that's connected to the evidence, because a lot of times when students have smaller action steps, they're evidence-based steps, or they need to think about what are some potential pieces of evidence that they could collect to show growth for all of their steps. So what sort of strategies do people have to help students scaffold their goals.
I think a helpful thing that is to look at them in a smaller period of time. So, for example, in the beginning of the week, if they're looking at a goal in the beginning of the week, or even on Friday for the following week, say, what's something you might be doing next week? And they might say, oh, I have a math test, or I'll be playing chess with a friend of mine. And so how do those things already, kind of looking ahead, what's one thing you think you'll do next week that will help you meet your goal? And I think making an action step maybe just for that week. So if they meet on a Friday and say, next week I'm going to go to my friend's house and we're going to be building this robot, then they could make an action step just for that following week, which I think is helpful, breaks it down and makes something measurable in a smaller period of time.
Don, you're muted.
Yeah. Sorry, I think I'm all right?
Yeah.
So I just want to say that this is why I have these conversations, is because I'm thinking right now, the way that Meg was just talking, is that the goal is like a living thing. It's not static. Like you can start gathering evidence for the things that you're doing for your smaller steps, right? So if you want to turn in all your assignments over the course of a month, as Meg said, what about just working on, okay, what am I doing this week to make that better? And you can have kids writing about that and collecting evidence on the way to their goal. I mean, I don't know, just for me, I always think about collecting evidence as of the finished goal. But wouldn't it be cool if we started making these goals much more living, so that they were collecting evidence all the way through? I think that's a great idea, and that just makes so much sense.
Yeah, and that's.
Oh, sorry.
Well, and that's what's been helping us, because we do it on Wednesdays where when they're writing their little blurbs for the week, and we encourage them, say, okay, what have you done this week? What are your next steps? And then that's one thing that we changed. This is the first year. In the past, we have done that where just at the end of the trimester, gather all your evidence for the goal. But this is the first time where on a week-to-week basis, we say as soon as you get something that shows you're working toward the goal, put it in your portfolio. Like we can just have all the kids bookmark it so they could be in any class, and they're like, oh, wow, this is a great. I feel really pumped about this piece of work. Boom, they open up their PLP in class, put it in, and they're all set. So I think that's totally enhanced like what we've done in the past, is just that, like you were saying, Don, keeping it like living and just part of the student's full day and full experience.
One of the things that we do, we have them, reflecting every week, but it also helps for the students to look at their evidence and look at their data and adjust a goal if necessary throughout the process. Because I think in the past, one of the experiences I had was a student would feel like they weren't being successful, and so they would stop, and instead of being able to have multiple opportunities for conversations or multiple opportunities to keep trying or adjusting, it was really hard for them to stay engaged. And I actually had, this was really funny, there was a boy this week who said to me, like, Ms. Kelly, when are we going to have time to put our blog post about our goals? I have a ton of stuff to talk about, and I know we have Winter Carnival on Friday. And I was like, well, you can do it any time. He was like, I have all these images I have to put on the blog. And so I think I need to get better at reminding them that it's not just the time on Friday morning. Like, you can do it right after your soccer game, or right after the hockey practice, or right after you finish your Khan Academy problem where you showed your thinking. Put it in right away, because it's you don't want to lose sight of that. And so we want them to be reflecting and collecting all the time.
So Maura and Kevin and Meg, I have to go a little bit early today, and I just want to, first of all, I just want to thank you again for taking the time. I know that we're right near vacation, but again, these conversations just are so helpful because they get me thinking about all the different aspects of what's happening with the implementation process, and I'm writing all these notes to make some changes. But one thing that we talked about at the beginning of the broadcast a little bit was this notion of having the kids and the counselors at the high school, right? I think, Kevin, how did you describe that? This vertical integration of the PLPs. And I just want to kind of remind us about that, because I think this could be a way for kids, as we maybe move through the counselors, as kids are getting ready to kind of leave 8th grade and go into the high school, maybe that's where the PLP can be inserted, so that when our kids and their families meet with the counselors at the high school, they can use the PLP as a sort of document or a guideline or a way of saying, hey, this is what I'm interested in. These are the evidence that I have that I've been making some goals. Here's some of my strengths and challenges, my relationships. And in that way, the counselors and the high school staff can get a much more complete picture than just asking some questions. And I just wonder if this is an extension of our sort of our process, you know, of our implementation process, that we then get our kids in front of these high school counselors with their PLPs, and then that directs them into the flexible pathways towards the goals and the activities and the classes that they want to take and that are going to increase their engagement and motivation. And again, this is just something that we started talking about or thinking about, and I want to encourage other people to be thinking about it too, because it has great potential.
Absolutely.
One of the things that it also makes me think about is, even within a middle school, if you're not teaching on a multi-age team, how are students sort of sharing with their future teachers who they are? So one of the things that I think our school did successfully last year was we really came together, and at the end of the school year we had a transition day where students showcased their PLPs, and their next year teacher went around and met with every student that they would be having. And so we were able to sort of move calendars around and schedules around to make it work. But one of the really nice things was the 9th grade English team. All the whole English department teaches 9th grade, and so they all came down and met with the 8th grade along with the guidance counselors, and they went around and did sort of round table presentations with the kids on their PLPs. And these English teachers were then responsible for implementing PLPs this year. And I think it was a good first step, but I think we need to think about, you know, how are we transitioning students from 8th to 9th grade, and then the next layer of that is how is the PLP helping to inform their high school experience, and not showing up to high school and having the portfolio experience be completely different.
Absolutely. So I'm going to sign out. You guys can continue the call. Thanks very much, and I hope everybody has a really great break. We'll see you on March 24th.
Thanks, Don.
Bye, Don.
Take care.
Does anyone have ideas about transitioning to high school with the PLP?
And Megan, I would be interested to hear what you guys are doing, but I know with our district, they tried using Naviance this year as, I guess, you know, a system for the hold the PLPs, and it definitely, you know, I can see where it can work and where there's issues with it. On our team, we haven't been, you know, we use it for what we need it for, but, you know, we're committed to the e-portfolios on Google Sites, and I feel like that gives you the whole picture, versus I feel like Naviance at times doesn't really give you, it's not as accessible as a Google site, and it's not as user friendly either. So as a district, like if we're committing to Naviance, you know, I'm constantly thinking like, okay, can we link our portfolios into Naviance so the high school counselors can see it, or, you know, our district's moving toward using jump rope all the way down the middle level. So is there, you know, something with standards-based assessment, and, you know, how can we get it so all the feeder schools going up to our high school are going to have similar, you know, things, so the guidance counselors aren't looking at a million different varieties of PLPs or report cards. So it's, I think it's a structural issue more than anything. Like, what system are we going to use for this? And I'd be really interested to hear what other, like, Meg, I don't know what you guys are using at Colchester.
Well, I'm kind of actually on the same page as you right now, Kevin, because our alternative program, we've been using Google Sites, and it's been a more of a flexible, creative process. Thanks to you guys, though, too, because I really, going into it, I didn't know, we as a team didn't know as much about Naviance, so, and our students have had digital portfolios in the past. So using Google Sites for PLPs felt like a more natural transition for us this year. There's definitely discussion with us and the guidance counselors about what we'll do in the future, because all of this Colchester High School students at the high school in the mainstream classes are using Naviance as well. But there's a large population that I've realized there's actually, well, I shouldn't say large isn't the right word. There's a population of students that are not accessing the PLP in the same way. So students who aren't accessing their guidance counselors, if they're in an alternative placement or for some reason aren't in mainstream classes, they're really not accessing it. So it's just a question that we have out there about how to make sure all kids get access. And it just provides a different experience. You're right, Kevin. Naviance, I think, is very helpful in a lot of ways. For example, for students that are college bound, it was so easy for me to be able to upload recommendation letters for them, and they sort of have this great program where they can have all of that information as well as PLP goals. So it's nice to have everything. I think it doesn't have as much room for the creativity that Google Sites has. But that might be something they might be able to tie together. So can they link their Google site and their blog and all these other pieces into Naviance? Maybe that they can combine them, because it's a great tool, but it also is a bit overwhelming. For many of my students, it felt it's a bit overwhelming, and the PLP is a portion of that. So it's just a different experience. I don't really know what, for us in the future, what we're going to be going with. It depends on my team and really what Colchester High School is expecting of us to do in the future. But I think it also depends, like you said, there's so many different software programs out there now as PLPs and proficiency-based grading requirements. As all of this comes about, there's a lot of new stuff being put out there. So we'll see, I guess. It's nice to kind of just be picking around at the resources and seeing what's out there and evaluating what's there and trying to just pick the best option for our kids. Yeah.
I'm glad I saw a question came up here. Do you think high schools are open to making schedule or structural changes, such as adding advisories? And with the PLP process, it's not something that I think you can just say, here's a platform, go do your PLP. It's not just go check off these boxes and write a quick paragraph and be done with it and there's your PLP. I don't think that can work. So I love that question, because with us, all of our PLPs are within our course. So with my homeroom, my core student, I have that relationship with them and their families. That's who we conference with. So moving forward, I know CVU has advisories, and I know they've already talked about using the PLP for their PBGRs in terms of the self-direction and citizenship.
Yeah.
Great, but other schools, do you switch to advisories? Because that's where the meaningful work comes in, is that communication, talking about what are the next steps, what's hard about your goals, what are you doing well with. That's where all the meaning comes out of this, is that reflection piece, and part of that reflection is getting feedback from people we have relationships with. So it's a big question that.
And I think Colchester, I think for us, advisory, we have an advisory block here as well as the high school, and I think that's where I think they're moving in a similar direction, that time will be used for that. I mean, when I've surveyed my kids about receiving adult support and receiving feedback, they all want it. They want to meet with their teachers. They want to talk about their goals. I think that's a really important piece, and I think the consistency has to be there. What I've noticed pretty clearly, students that I see, I have some students for core classes that I see on a regular basis that I work on their PLPs with them, and their PLPs are more in depth. They're way more connected. There are some students, unfortunately, that I just don't see as often, and it gets lost with them.
Yeah.
Which is hard. So it really has to be, I think there just has to be a process for meeting with students on a consistent basis, and there has to be some adult, there has to be a point person or someone from their advisory or an important adult in their life to be able to consistently meet with them, or it will get lost, I think.
Just to piggyback on that, I know at the high school at PA, we've had a long-standing multi-age TA system. So you're assigned to your TA and you stay with your advisor for your whole sort of high school experience, and it's a lot of community building and building on school culture. And this year, with only the 9th grade having PLPs, there was a big conversation of how do we make this work, and we don't have a 9th grade team. And so that's how it fell to the English department this year. And one of the questions that Tricia just asked was, do you think that, or it might not have been Tricia, but can counselors really keep track of it? And I think what we're all saying from our experience is it really needs to be one point adult who's in communication with the student and the family and has time to check in and is invested in this, because I think it's really important that this sticks with them. And I think, going back to what you were saying earlier, Kevin, about the multi-age being a benefit, being able to work with students on their goals for several years, I think that's really important when it comes down to being successful.
I think it will also make a difference tying together proficiency-based grading and PLPs, because right now our guidance department is working really hard to it's a lot to manage, hundreds of students, PLPs. It's a huge task. But I think it will, as it moves towards working with an advisory group, and you have then you have a 12 to 14 maybe group of students, and that person is responsible for helping you manage your PLP. And as it connects to, I think, to proficiency-based grading, then all of a sudden all the content teachers, now we're all in the game. So yeah. I think as it moves forward, it will get hopefully more people involved and not fall so heavily on guidance departments. Yeah, at least for the high school.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, for it to be meaningful work, like you said, you need to have some sort of advisory system, because you can't just expect a few guidance counselors to take care of and do justice to taking care of that many PLPs. And I know Life just posted about possibly the move to, I don't know if it's ProTN or Protein, but the new platform.
Yeah.
And I think it'd be great to see what's out there. The only thing I'm worried about, what I like about Google Sites is it's something that I think that's not going anywhere anytime soon. Most schools are moving toward a Google platform, and it's really easy to use, embedding your Google Docs, your Google Slides, the things that we're using in our content area classes that we're using as evidence a lot of times for most of these schools. The only thing I worry about with other platforms is, one, the PD around teaching teachers how to use yet another piece.
Cool.
Two, like, what's going to happen in 2 or 3 years? Like, is the next best thing to come out? We have to go through the whole shift around PD, and then what's going to happen to the PLPs that were in one platform? How are they going to shift? That's my only hesitation around that. Like, I'm always open. I would love to try out new things and learn new things, and but there's definitely things that get me a little worried about certain systems and platforms.
And I think James made a really nice point too about the importance of, the student needs to be personalized for them, and the more standardized whatever platform is, or even within Google Sites, the more standardized that you're making your students be. For a lot of students, they're going to be really turned off because they're not going to see themselves in this personal learning plan. And so, we really have to think about the student. That's really the central driving force to whatever choices are made. So really going to students to get data on that. The next thing, just to sort of think about, I know we've been talking about a lot of different things, but thinking about goals, and this is sort of the last little bit to see if you have any feedback, but are goals too teacher-driven, and what are we doing? I know I still have students who maybe have just finished a goal or are working on developing the next goal or adjusting a goal. What techniques have people been using to try and encourage them to stay student-centered even when you see a student who might be struggling with a goal?
I know from us, since we have a 4-year team, 558, that first Hopes and Dreams conference with our incoming 5th graders is most important for us, just because that's when we have the communication about who the student is, as a whole student, what their strengths, what their weaknesses are, and get to hear their voice for the first time, really. They're typically shy at that point, but it's, ahead of time, they fill out this whole profile form, their parents fill out a profile form, and then we try to go off of basically what the students write, and that opens up the conversations about what things am I good at, what things do I want to get better at, and we start from that conversation and move forward, and then present the document that we created with, here's a bunch of list of goals that we've used in the past to just get the ball rolling, to start thinking about it, or just kind of coming up with how they want the goal to sound, and that's been helpful. And then when we have conferences, and students are like, yeah, I don't think I need this goal anymore. Like, here's all my evidence. I feel like this is something I do naturally. I don't need to reflect on it every week. Then, again, it comes back to the conversation. I think it's so important to have that face-to-face conversation. Like, all right, well, what's important to you? What's you're living day to day in this school day? Like, what would you like to work on next? So I think that, it takes a lot of time, but having that conversation is the most important for us anyway.
Mm-hmm. I think it will look different as in the future when students have a PLP already in place, but I know for us this year that the whole introductory phase of having students, and this is a lot I got from PLP Pathways, which was so great, having students write a biography or an autobiography, things like learning style inventories and personality tests, and my kids had a blast taking like a Myers-Briggs test, and stuff like that can be really fun in the beginning. I think as we go through, you don't want students to feel like they're doing the same thing year after year. Some kids have said, like, don't make me do another learning styles inventory, Megan. But, you want it to be fresh, of course, but I think that introductory phrase of that whole piece of who am I and what do I love to do and what kind of student, what kind of person am I, like you talked about values and principles, all of that, especially in the beginning when you come into a new year, I think is really important. It helps them move into, okay, here's who I am, now here's what my goals are. I think that's the best, to have that phase in the beginning is really important.
Last week we had a really nice opportunity where the 7th grade had already, my grade, we've already sort of done our mid-year check-in, or more formalized, let's go through all the evidence, let's see how it's going, because we have student-led conferences coming up in March. But the 5th grade was feeling like it was the first year that these students are working on designing goals and the first year of working on PLPs, and they were kind of all over the place with their goals and their evidence. And so we took an hour last week where our 5th graders and our 7th graders were paired as goals partners, and our 7th graders crafted questions around SMART goals, and the process shared out some of their own celebrations and their own work, and helped their students sort of formalize their own goals. And so we took a little bit of data on that and asked them, okay, so now that you've worked with someone on designing a goal, did it impact your own goals or your own evidence? And the kids overwhelmingly said that they wanted to continue working together, that they really liked working sort of both ways. They were both giving really great advice to everyone. But one of the things that I think was really helpful was it gave our students an authentic audience, and it gave them sort of more pride in their work and gave them a sense of confidence in their ability to help another student with something that they might have found challenging, setting goals. And so I think, in thinking about just making it as social as you can, even though, it is personal, students get so engaged when they're able to talk with others. Life asked us a question about merging the proficiency-based grading and the PLPs. And so, maybe if we want to add a few last thoughts around that. And then James said, in Act 77, PLPs are intended to allow students to create goals and develop evidence. The PLPs are not, it just moved, a mechanism for tracking, I lost it, sorry. Not a mechanism for monitoring school proficiencies such as PBGRs. That is up to teachers and schools. Perhaps we can have a session about this issue.
Yeah, that's probably going to take a full session to talk about.
Yeah, I think so. Have you guys been starting to have conversations at your school about this?
Yeah, so we switched from the vital results to the transferable skills because CVU switched to the PBGRs using transferable skills. So it just kind of seemed like a no-brainer for us. The vital results were essentially, very similar to transferable skills. So we're like, all right, why not just switch our language and switch what we're doing it so when our kids go into high school it makes more sense. But we're still hashing out that piece, and I think that's obviously going to take more of a stance in high school than with us.
And we're really just starting to talk about what our proficiencies will be at the high school. I think there is definitely Well, there's a push for them to be tied together, I think, right now. And like I said, we did this right now, I think, looking at having students look at other goals they had, like in their IEPs. But I think that we have a lot to hash out still. I think we'll be figuring a lot out in the net, but we could spend a whole session, I'm sure, talking about.
Big conversation.
I know, even within my own school, we've started having conversations about what is the next step and what is it going to look like, and I know that this is a conversation that I think it does get tricky, because a lot of times when we think about transferable skills and proficiency-based graduation requirements, a lot of times they feel very connected, and that the line can be kind of blurry, keeping them in one area or the next. And even, you know, we've taken one of the transferable skills and written it as a proficiency, as a learning target, and created a learning scale around it, to design an assessment tool to, you know, help students get feedbacks on their goal setting and on their evidence and PLPs. But I think this is a really big conversation that a lot of schools are going to be having, and there's going to be some big decisions that are going to need to be made kind of over the next year. I know we're talking about it this summer as a school, to make some decisions for next year.
And I think there's discussion about the PLP really being a vehicle for a way for students to demonstrate proficiencies in a more personal way. But it is important. I'm glad James mentioned it. It's because it's important to know that they really are. The PLP should be really that personal plan for students to focus on their goals, and I think it could definitely, as a high school perspective, and hearing people talk about the PLP being the vehicle for a way for students to demonstrate proficiencies, I think that they still can be very separate, and a separate process for those things.
Mm-hmm. Well, we are just about out of time, but I wanted to just sort of remind people that there is a request for manuscripts for the middle grades review. And so if you have any professional reflections or anything that you would like to add or submit, you can go to either our website at PLP Pathways, or you can go through the Middle Grades Collaborative. And also registration opened on February 8th for the Middle Grades Institute, which is going to be held at Castleton State College this year. And you know, we've talked about so many examples of teams who have come and really set themselves off for really great success with PLPs after having been at the Middle Grades Institute. Would anyone like to add any last thoughts before we sign off?
Good. Thanks again for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
I hope everyone has a safe break, for those of us who have breaks coming up after tomorrow, and we will be back on March 24th, and we'll continue our conversation about PLPs and probably proficiency-based graduation requirements, as that's definitely a pressing topic. So I look forward to seeing everyone then.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Bye.